This is the Ball Talk Podcast, presented by Nachos and Analysis.
What's going on, Tiger fans? Today is Thursday, April 13th, and welcome to the 11th episode of the Ball Talk Podcast, presented by Nachos and Analysis. I'm your host, Drew Archer, and let's talk some ball. Well, it was a big weekend in Clemson for some softball. The results did not go the Tigers' way. We talked about it here last week. A top 10 opponent in Florida State come into town, the eyes of college softball at McWhorter Stadium, and the Tigers absolutely could not get it done. The Tigers get swept for their first conference loss, their first conference series loss, their first sweep of the season. Just about anything that could go wrong went wrong. You saw some fight in that final game Friday night in the rain, but the Tigers could not get it done. So they dropped to 38-4, 12-3 in the conference. As we mentioned, swept by Florida State. It ends the 23-game win streak that the Tigers had going. And that 23-game win streak was a school record. They fell to number 7 following the season. Florida State up to 4th in the country. And you had so much excitement. You thought the Tigers were ready to turn a page in this series with Florida State. The team has accomplished so much in so little time, and they were not able to check that beat Florida State box. We'll have to wait till hopefully conference championship, conference tournament, or even next season. So Tigers could not get it done, but they do bounce back. They get a win in a big way in Columbia, South Carolina. They sweep the season series with South Carolina. You had to like what you saw there in this game in Columbia, because the team was struggling early. It looked like a little bit of a hangover from the weekend, and they found a way to come back in the end. And I say it was a team effort, but the GOAT, Valerie Cagle, does it yet again. I don't know why I'm surprised every time she does something. She just continues to do amazing things. Winning games, pitching, hitting home runs, hitting grand slams, doing it all. And it was on the shoulders of Valerie Cagle with 2 outs, 2 strikes. South Carolina was 1 pitch away from beating Clemson for the very first time in program history. Valerie Cagle said, no, not today. So the Tigers sweep South Carolina. They remain undefeated all time against the Gamecocks in a electric finish down in Columbia. On the baseball diamond, a lot of positives this weekend in baseball. The Tigers get their first ACC series win against Florida State. They did what the softball team couldn't do, which is something all season we've been saying about vice versa. The softball team has been getting it done all year. And this weekend it was the baseball team. They are getting in a little bit of a rhythm here after the first game Thursday night. Was a little concerned with how the Tigers performed, but Friday and Saturday they get it done in a big way, win their first series in the Atlantic Coast Conference this season. And you needed that. You see glimpses. We talked about it last week with Wake Forest. They were in all of those games and could not find a way to get even one win out of it. So it was nice to see the Tigers, with their backs against the wall, a loss in game 1, come back and get the bats going and put a lot of runs up to beat Florida State. The big story here in the final game, Caden Grice grand slam. We'll get into it here a little bit, but I think that there is a correlation between him returning to his role as a pitcher and his success at the plate. They brought it up in the broadcast the other day, and me and some folks were talking about it last week out at Doug Kingsmore. If you go back and track when Caden started getting it going at the plate, it's right around the same exact time that he started pitching again. So liking what you're seeing out of him both on the mound and at the plate. And then they head into this weekend series with Notre Dame with yet another win. They traveled to Athens Tuesday night to beat the Bulldogs 8-1. This continues their streak of winning midweek games for the 8 consecutive midweek games. The Tigers are 9-1 on the season in those midweek games. That lone loss to USC Upstate. So they continue winning those midweek games. They are finding a way to get some wins, and another big weekend coming up where you gotta hope to get out of the series with at least 2 wins. So big weekend on the baseball diamond. The softball team gets swept. The ACC still runs through Tallahassee, unfortunately, but the ladies find a way to get back in the win column before they have their weekend series this weekend. So let's get into it and let's talk some softball. All right, before we get into actual real analysis and discussion of the game, I'm just going to go ahead and pin these losses on one particular individual. Clemson softball was doing great until Beth Mowins showed up to call Clemson games. Wednesday night, the midweek game against Furman, she's breaking the golden rule about talking about a no-hitter. McCubbin pitched an excellent game against the Paladins. And it was a tough game, too. And she repeatedly brought it up. And guess what happened there? I can't remember if it was the 6th, probably it was the 7th inning. Gave up a hit. No in that game. Well, the whole reason she was in town was to call this big series with Florida State this weekend. She called all 3 games. So, I am formally blaming Beth Mowins for this loss here because the Tigers were looking amazing prior to her 4 games in Tiger Town. But realistically, let's get into some of these games. So Thursday night was not a good night at all for the Tigers. They played a doubleheader due to the weather in Clemson. They played 2 games. Tigers got outscored 11-1 in 2 games. First game they lost 7-0. Then the 6 o'clock game they lose 4-1. And then Friday, a tough loss in the rain, in the cold, in the wind, a tough 3-2 loss to Florida State. That first game, not a whole lot to talk about. Cagle drops to 18-2 in the circle. She pitched 6 innings with just 5 strikeouts. She was she got her first hit of the ball game for the Tigers in the bottom of the 4th inning, but they could not score. The number 3 was the key number in this ball game. 3 costly errors by the Tigers, 3 runs on 2 hits in the 5th inning, and the final dagger, a 3-run homer to make the final score 7-0. So the Tigers could not avoid those 3s. Those 3 costly errors were a big blow to this team. So they dropped game 1 7-0. Then in game 2 of the doubleheader, Millie Thompson starts. She pitched 4 innings, 2 strikeouts. She fell to 11-1 on the circle. She was replaced by fifth-year sophomore Brooke. Fifth-year sophomore. Oh, she was replaced in the 5th, by sophomore Brooke McCubbin. Brooke pitched 2 innings before Spencer came in to pitch the final inning there. After scoring 1 run in the 3rd, Florida State plated 2 in the 4th to take a 3-0 lead. Cagle responded with a solo homer, her 14th of the season, but that was not enough. FSU responded with another solo home run shot to make the final score 4-1. So within a 5-hour period, Clemson not only lost its first ACC game, but it lost its second and the series in about a 5-hour time period. You hoped after that first game the Tigers were going to brush it off, get something new going, and find a way to get a win there. Did not happen. Friday, I was able to make this game Friday. And let me just say this. It did not rain a drop. Did not rain a drop until first pitch happened. I know it wasn't the nicest of days. It was pretty cold. A lot of wind and weather and that kind of stuff in the surrounding area. When I was in Greenville, it was raining all day, but I'm told it didn't rain in Clemson, really. But the second the game started, we're standing out there in Cagle's corner. Again, shout out to them for the invite for this game. But first pitch starts raining, wind directly in the face, and that quite possibly could have been the coldest I've ever been at a Clemson sporting event. And I've been to a lot. I've been to games, even this season at Doug Kingsmore Stadium, where it's so cold we're holding our hands on the top of the grill in the Cajun Cafe just to get some feeling back. But I think I might have been colder in this game. I was definitely wet, and it was not fun, especially with the outcome there. And a lot happened. It was an eventful game. This was Clemson's first loss of the season when scoring first. They started the game 1-0 off a Cagle RBI. Later on, FSU tied it up in the bottom of the fourth with Julia Bumhart, who was running for Jacobson. She took advantage of a failed pickoff attempt from FSU's catcher, who overthrew first base, that allowed Bumhart to score. So the Seminoles scored 2 in the 6th to make it 3-2. That'd ultimately be your final score. Clemson's comeback was halted when Clark got thrown out at second after hesitating rounding first base for the final out of the game. I felt so bad for her because she was trying to win that game. She was trying to advance to get into scoring position. But as she rounded first, she did not commit. She hesitated for a moment and then ultimately decided to go, and it was not close. So the throw was there in plenty of time. Cagle pitched her 14th complete game and fell to 18-3 on the year. She picked up 4 strikeouts during the 7-inning performance. Assistant coach Kyle Jamison from the right field at Cagle's corner, I couldn't quite tell who it was. I thought it was Coach Rittman, comes bolting out of the dugout after a controversial ball call. But ultimately it turned out to be Coach Jamison. He was thrown out of the game in the 5th after arguing a ball call after a few questionable calls in that inning. The umpires were hearing it from the fans there at McWhorter Stadium. They were cold and miserable, and the hometown crowd did not like the way they were officiating this game. There was some, who am I to question them? I'm standing on the back of a pickup truck in the outfield over 200 feet away. So, but it looked a little off to me there. Coach Rittman was asked about it after the game. He said, "I just couldn't catch him quick enough. Usually I can grab him by the back, but he was out of the chute pretty quick there. He was just sticking up for the players and the team. I had been out a couple of times, so I think he had reached his tipping point." And yeah, prior to KJ getting thrown out of the game, Coach Rittman had been out there to have some discussions with the umpire as well. So all around, it's frustrating because as fans, there was some questionable calls. And trust me, this is not me putting this on the officiating because I don't like those people. Clemson did not lose because of the officiating. They were not aided by it, but they did not lose because of it. But between that, the weather, you come close but can't quite get there. It was just all around just not a fun night out at McWhorter Stadium. It's the first time I've witnessed in person a softball loss. It just did not go the Tigers' way. And as I said, as good as this team has been, as historic as they have been, they are not atop the ACC. Florida State came in battle tested. We touched on it last week. Prior to this weekend, you can add 3 more to it, but prior to this weekend, they had played 12 games against top 25 opponents, many of which were in the top 5. I think they've faced 4 teams from the top 5 prior to this weekend. Then they face a top 10 Clemson team. They were 6-6 heading into this weekend. They're now 9-6 against ranked teams this season. So they are a lot more battle tested. Clemson's strength of record, I believe, is 69th right now, and in a series like this against a quality opponent, you can see that. You can definitely see that. So the good thing is the Tigers do get a bounce-back game. This Tuesday, they travel to South Carolina, and as I mentioned, they looked a little sleepy there at the beginning. That pitcher for South Carolina, she was giving them problems. However, you have to commend the team at the plate. They were battling. They were fouling balls off. I was keeping track of her pitch count. I think she got pretty close. I don't know if she went over, but pretty close to 120 pitches in the game. Nobody was really having any luck with her at the mound. And speaking on the mound or in the circle, Millie Thompson, she started for the Tigers. It was a rough day for her. She only pitched 1 inning. She was replaced by Brooke McCubbin in the 2nd inning, and Brooke came in and pitched for 4 and a 3rd inning with 2 strikeouts and only allowed 2 hits. She was who settled things down for the Tigers. You hate it for Millie. It was not her day. McCubbin was replaced in the 6th inning by Cagle, who threw the final 1 2/3 innings. She improved to 19-3 on the season. As far as the game goes, the Gamecocks took an early 2-0 lead in the first. Clemson then cut the lead in half when Clark scored off a Jacobson RBI double. But then in the top of the 7th inning, Miklish led off with a single and stole a base. She was then joined by Clark, who was walked with 2 outs, 2 on, 2 strikes. Valerie Cagle sent a 3-1 shot out of left field to make the score 4-2. South Carolina was 1 pitch away. And as much as I commend this pitcher for South Carolina, why would you pitch to Valerie Cagle? That was the biggest mistake right there. They thought that they could pitch around her. They thought they could finish her off, strike her out. Cagle said no. So Cagle took the lead for the Tigers 4-2. She then went back out in the top of the 7th. She did give up a home run, which made it a little bit scary there, but it was not enough. The Tigers win 4-3. They're 5-0 all-time against the Gamecocks. It was awesome to watch. I had softball on one screen, football on the other screen. Huge crowd out at, I don't even know what South Carolina Stadium's called, but in Columbia, tons of orange. You could hear when something good went for Clemson. There was a large Clemson fan base there. Just going off what I saw, I don't know for a fact. I'm going to say maybe 50-50 crowd split, but I could be wrong with that. So if somebody else was there, correct me, let me know. But good to see Tigers prevail over the Gamecocks, get back in the win column before they have yet another big ACC series this weekend. So this weekend, the Tigers travel to Raleigh. They'll face NC State in a 3-game series Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Friday night at 6 o'clock on ACC Network Extra. Saturday at 2 o'clock, ACC Network Extra. And then Sunday at 4 p.m. on ACC Network. The Wolfpack is 33-23 right now, which, if you do that quick math, this team has already played 56 games on the season. And let me scroll up here and look and see where Clemson's record's at. They've played 56. Clemson has played 42. Clemson's played 42 games. NC State has faced they have played 56 games. I don't know how this disparity happened in two programs that started seemingly at the same time, but they're 7-17 in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Some of their common opponents, Syracuse, Georgia Tech, they beat Syracuse 2-1, got swept by Georgia Tech. So that's kind of some good news. Clemson swept Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech swept the Wolfpack. So you do the math there. And then for the midweek game, the Tigers face Winthrop. They'll play them Tuesday at 5:30 on ACC Network Extra. Prior to the weekend series they have with Presbyterian, they are 25-14 heading into that series. And former Clemson shortstop and friend of the program, Ansley Gilstrap, is an assistant coach for that Winthrop staff. So should be a fun matchup at McWhorter Stadium there. So the Tigers hit the road for their next ACC series and then return home Tuesday for a midweek game against Winthrop. All right, poll of the week. Looky here, 2 weeks in a row. I remember. So our poll of the week is in quotations because it's not technically a poll, but I posted it wanting some conversation and thoughts back, and we got a handful of people that got in with their response. So this week's poll of the week was, what are your thoughts on Clemson baseball's program 34 games into Eric Bakwich's first season with the team? So the Tigers, off their first weekend series win in the Atlantic Coast Conference this weekend, done exceptionally well in the midweeks there. But here's what a few folks had to say. Again, this is posted each week on Twitter. So if you don't follow us on Twitter, you don't get a say-so. You don't get a shout-out on each episode. So Emily Edwards quote retweets and says, improvement in all areas. The record may not show it yet, but it's coming. I love the fight these guys are showing and the belief in themselves and their teammates. They're never out of a game. That's huge. And I agree wholeheartedly. We've talked about how they're not out of these games, really. Riley O'Neill Green Sr. says, I think it's going about how we expected it to so far. Some good wins, some bad losses. There's still a lot of season left to exceed expectations, though. Joey Garrison gets in and says, haven't seen enough to fill him out. So much of the old guard that is hard to peg if it's things are processing or not. I feel next year is going to be more of an indicator. I do like the confidence he has given Caden. And then Peter Marvin says the losses are disappointing, but expected with the transition. There are some things that I really like seeing from this team and the coaching staff. I see improvement even if the wins aren't there in ACC play. Year 2 will be the big tell. This sounds like a bunch of reasonable fans. Early on in the season, I think we mentioned it, people were losing their minds trying to blame this on Jack Leggett. He's meddling with the program, all kinds of stuff. It's good to know this week, at least this week, with the folks that got in, and thanks again, guys, for getting in. But these are 4 very reasonable takes. Yes, there's been some improvement. One of the commenters mentioned Caden Grice. We've talked about him. There's been some good losses. There have been some bad losses. But there's still a lot of guys that are from Monty's system, from Monty's style of coaching and play, that are still learning, changing, and that kind of thing. So I definitely agree year 2 will be the biggest tell. But you have to like what you've seen so far with the fight in this team. They're in every game. They're doing a great job in midweek games. Going back to that South Carolina series, South Carolina is on a big tear right now. They're doing really, really well. They're exceeding expectations in Columbia. Tigers get a win Friday night against South Carolina, and we're in most of the game, that game 2 in Greenville. You wish you could have pulled that out. That would have been, that one loss right there would have been a huge, if it were a win for the Tigers. But they've faced some good competition in Wake Forest, South Carolina, a lot of these midweek teams we've mentioned, College of Charleston, Coastal Carolina, and they've won or been in all of those games. So I say so far, a little past midway point here in the season, Coach Bakic's first half is a success so far. I'm pleased with what I've seen out of the team. Even just listening to interviews with the players, they sound different. They're talking different, but they're all on the same page. You can hear they're on the same page. They're saying the same things. The reporter that interviewed Caden Grice after the Florida State game on Saturday, where he pitched and hit a grand slam, she kept trying to turn the questions on him and what is it he did, what was he seeing. But every chance he got, he turned it back around on his teammates. The teammates were putting me in position, and it was a team effort. And I think this team is cohesive. I think that when one is down, they're picking each other up. And I like what we see in the dugout out of this team. So I'm a big fan personally of what we've seen so far this season. And we got a tough road ahead of us. We got some big conference series coming up and a lot of season left to play. The Tigers are not out of postseason play. They can make a big stride this weekend with Notre Dame. So they are doing a great job at the right time. So hopefully that can transition into some more wins on the weekend. Take that momentum you have each week in the midweek game and win one or two more each weekend. And we're talking about a Tiger team that is going back to postseason after missing it 2 seasons in a row. Before we get to baseball, can't not mention our sponsor, Pump Monkey Septic Service. Pump Monkey is located here in the upstate, owned and operated by Clemson alumni Alan Powell. I say it again and again, septic service is not something that you want to be in a bind with. You don't want to be struggling to find somebody to get out there to pump your septic tank. Pump Monkey is getting that reputation of being the guys that come out on the weekend when folks are in a bind, when some of these bigger name brands are not able to get out there. So Pump Monkey Septic Service, find them on Facebook or Instagram. Call them or text them at 864-710-2211. Again, 864-710-2211. When the dump's funky, call Pump Monkey. All right, before I get into Clemson baseball, I meant to mention it when we were talking a little bit about South Carolina, though. South Carolina had a huge series with LSU this week, and unfortunately they couldn't get Game 3 in due to the weather. But shout out to the Spurs Up Show for quote tweeting my tweet talking about that grand slam that LSU hit to take the lead and ultimately seal the deal for a victory in Game 2 for the LSU Tigers. But while the Masters was delayed, Carolina fans did not disappoint. They were my entertainment Saturday afternoon on Twitter. And my mentions are still blowing up with stuff from the softball game. Unfortunately, getting tagged in all these debates with Carolina fans has my notifications going off constantly. But I get a kick out of these fans, South Carolina fans, opposing fans of any team, that think that some of this trash talk and things they're throwing out there hurt my feelings, embarrass me, or whatever. It's a game to me on Twitter. So they thought they were throwing jabs, talking about how Clemson baseball's doing. Hey, I have reasonable expectations. I don't expect Clemson baseball to make it to Omaha this year. So picking a Clemson baseball in year one of a new coach who, let's face it, time will tell, but a far better coach than what you have there in Columbia right now. So a fun weekend on Twitter with Carolina fans back and forth. Then after the South Carolina game, all it took was a couple tweets and a couple retweets from Carolina fans in the mentions getting after us, belittling women's sports because unfortunately there have been Clemson fans in years past making fun of Carolina and their obsession with with women's basketball, but you'll never see anything like that from this account. But picking at Clemson for supporting a women's sport, acting like it's not important, is not the move. All right, so if you're a Clemson fan that does this, stop. If you're a South Carolina fan that thinks it's going to upset or ruffle Clemson feathers, no. All right, what the softball team is doing is historic. Carolina's coach has yet to beat Clemson in 5 meetings. This is an established program that's been around for a long time. Can't beat little old Clemson at softball. So between that, poking the bear, talking about the LSU series, and the victory on the softball diamond, Twitter has been fun the last few days with all these Carolina fans. So, but enough about little brother. Let's get into some baseball here. Clemson gets its first ACC series victory of the season, defeating the Seminoles 2-1. The Tigers dropped that first game Thursday night 5-1, and Thursday was a rough day to be a Clemson fan. It really was. Those 2 losses to Florida State in softball, losing to Florida State 5-1 in baseball, was not an enjoyable experience. And it had me kind of doubting, like, is this the way this weekend's going to go? But the Tigers do bounce back Friday and Saturday, getting wins to clinch the series. But Thursday, Jackson Baumeister totaled a career-high 14 strikeouts to lead Florida State to the 5-1 victory. He pitched lights out. Jamie Furr belted a 2-run homer in the first inning. Then the Seminoles added single runs in the 3rd and 4th inning. Tibbs, the 3rd, blasted a solo homer in the 5th to give Florida State the 5-0 lead. The Tigers got on the scoreboard in the 8th inning on a Blake Wright sacrifice fly after 3 walks loaded the bases. We're going to get into it in the next 2 games, but the Florida native Blake Wright had a huge weekend for the Tigers. So the Tigers dropped that first game 5-1 on Thursday night. But Friday, they turned it around in a big way. Ethan Darden pitched 5 scoreless innings in his first career ACC start for Clemson. Blake Wright had a huge game. Had an RBI single for the first run of the game. He picked off a runner at 3rd with a hidden ball trick. And in the 6th, hit another RBI single. Riley Bertram executed the double squeeze bunt to score 2 runs, giving the Tigers a 4-0 lead. Back-to-back doubles in the 8th, scored another run before, you guessed it, Blake Wright hit yet another RBI single, his 3rd of the game. So 3 RBI singles for Blake Wright, pushing those runs across to give the Tigers an 8-1 victory there. Then Saturday, the rubber match game, Grice was on the mound, and he had a huge presence at the plate. Grice is now 2-1 on the season. He earned the win by pitching a career-high 6 1/3 inning, allowing just 5 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks, and 5 strikeouts. Blake Wright picked up where he left off Friday with another RBI single. So 4 RBI singles on the weekend. In the 2nd, Clemson scored 5 runs with 2 outs, capped off by Caden Grice's grand slam. Clemson gave up a 2-run homer in the 7th, but it did not matter. The game was never in doubt. That was a fun game to watch. As much as I hate when Clemson goes on the road, because I don't get to go out and hang out and watch it at Doug Kingsmore Stadium, I get to actually watch a lot more of the game, get to see things that I don't see when I'm there in person in right field. So this one was fun to just kick back on the old recliner and watch the Tigers get a big victory, secure that first ACC series of the season. They head to Georgia for the midweek game. This, like Saturday's game with Florida State, was never really in doubt. After the Bulldogs scored a 2-out run in the 3rd inning, Amick crushed a 3-run homer, his 3rd home run of the year, with 2 outs in the 4th inning. The Tigers then scored 4 runs in the 5th inning to build to a 7-1 lead. Will Taylor and Amick belted 2-run scoring doubles to highlight that inning. Clemson added an insurance run in the 8th on Cam Calarella's RBI fielder's choice there. Willie Weiss, the transfer from Michigan, earned the win by striking out the only batter he faced in the 3rd inning. 7 Tiger pitches. Listen to this: 7 Tiger pitchers. I can't speak. I'm just going to start that whole statement all over again. 7 Tiger pitchers combined to limit the Bulldogs to only 5 hits in the game. I saw someone bring this up on Tiger Illustrated. If you would have told me this group of pitchers was going to be who we were going to throw out there against Georgia on the road, I would have told you we would have lost. But as a team, as a unit, they came together and pitched an amazing game. One other thing before we get into the series coming up this weekend, I am not a fan of the style of the seating or the stadium setup that you got here in Athens and in Tallahassee. The backdrop, it's got to be 6 or 7 feet up off the ground, and it's just like a tacky looking massive wall with like a window for people to look through, and then something similar but with more suite type seating at Georgia. Not a big fan of those setups there behind home plate. It's kind of distracting. It's not appealing to the eye. So I don't know if that, at least especially with Georgia, with the people being able to get up and move and the space in that little suite area behind home plate, I don't know if that's meant to be distracting to opposing pitchers, but not a fan of that. So, but this weekend, big series with Notre Dame, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday series. Glad to get back to those after 2 weeks of starting the series is on Thursday. Friday night will be on ACC Network at 8 o'clock. Saturday at 4, ACC Network Extra. And Sunday at 1 on ACC Network Extra. Now, I saw this earlier in the week, and I hadn't gone back to check. Let me see, because weather could be an issue for Friday. It's still looking like rain on Friday and Sunday. So, with what already is a busy game with the spring football game happening on Saturday, you could make that a doubleheader and add to the already chaotic Saturday, which I'm here for the chaos. As much time as I can spend in Clemson, I want more and more time in Clemson. It's one of my favorite places on earth. So if that means I have to get there early, forced to sit out there and watch 2 baseball games and a football game, sign me up. But also on Saturday, they're honoring legendary head coach Jack Leggett. They're retiring his number on Saturday's game. And if the schedule holds and they're just playing one game on Saturday, they timed it out perfectly. I believe the football spring game starts at 1, and then first pitch for the baseball games at 4. So fans will have the opportunity to watch some football across the street, then walk over and watch some baseball, get a chance to see Coach Leggett's number get retired. So Saturday is one of my favorite days of the year when it works out. The last couple of years, it has not worked out where they've had a home baseball series the same day as a spring game. So it's been a couple of years. Fans, if you're going to both, pace yourselves. It's a long day. You are out of tailgating touch, as I'd imagine. So don't go too hard. It's a long day. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. But I really looking forward to that. Should be fun. Notre Dame comes to town. They're 17-13 on the season, 7-8 in the Atlantic Coast Conference. They've lost series to Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, UNC. So 2 of those there. Opponents Clemson has already seen and have lost series to as well. The one advantage for them, they did squeak out a win against Wake Forest where the Tigers could not. Then the midweek game this week, Georgia comes to Clemson to wrap up that midweek series. It'll be huge to hopefully get another sweep. The Tigers have already swept College of Charleston in the midweek, so it'd be really nice to get that with Georgia as well. So a big weekend of baseball, softball, Clemson football. Looking forward to spending as much time as possible in Clemson on Saturday. But thank y'all for joining us again for episode 11. Join me next week and we'll talk some ball. Peace.